Then you started to see a shift where more disturbed, sicker, more drug-involved people started to come.
The hallucinogenic drugs like LSD were being replaced by stimulant drugs, speed particularly, that led to compulsion and paranoia, and innocence was giving way to violence.
You may recall a song, the lyrics of which were, if you come to San Francisco, you better wear a flower in your hair. By 1967, if you came to San Francisco, you needed to wear a .45 in your belt. It had changed that fast. The kids were still coming from all over the United States with the same set of expectations, but the welcoming committee was very, very different. There was a brand of street theater that was hard to imagine.
If we are coming up to the beatnik area, all the stores out in this area, they're taken over by the beatniks, and we see them in all shapes and sizes. I think this one is a girl walking in front of us. She has a hair ribbon, but it's hard to tell.
It was a scene where if you grew your hair and talked the talk, you fit in.
This was the scene which Charles Manson entered on his release from prison in 1967.
When he came out, he initially told me that there was nothing I could do, that that he could go back to prison. He was not afraid of it. He was not going to do parole if parole was going to be onerous. He was clearly an antisocial personality. He was superficial, he was glib, and he was very adaptable.
And when I got out, all your children would come to me because they never had anybody to tell them the truth.
He sized up people, I think, fairly quickly and fairly accurately. I think that's a skill you learn in prisons.
He said, so your father just kicked you out of the house. And that started it.
Lynette Squeaky Fromm joined up with Manson early on.
It was easy to talk to him. And we talked on a number of levels. His mind intrigued me.
Charlie was what he needed to be at any given time.
Pat Krenwinkel was another early member of Manson's growing family.
I met Charlie when I was living at the beach with my sister, and she came home and said to go down to a friend's house, which I did, and Charlie was there, and he was playing the guitar. And so I was introduced to him there. And that night, we slept together, and I felt really loved by him almost immediately, mostly because I think at that point I was really desperate for someone to care. When we made love, all I remember is just crying and crying to this man. I mean, it was like, because he said, oh, you're beautiful. I couldn't believe that. I just started crying.
Manson's family grew to include men. One of them was the young, all-American Texan, Charles Tex Watson.
Charlie used sex for, number one, when people would come and he wanted power over them, men, he would offer them whatever women he had. And he had certain women he always put out front, which he called his front street girls. They were the ones that he thought were the most beautiful, the ones that would be the most enticing. And that's what he would do. I mean, he was an excellent pimp.
Charles Manson was not only attracting followers, he was also exercising more control over them.
Whatever he believed, I would believe. And I would say, and I would spout off.
I began to get increasingly uncomfortable with the amount of control and the way in which he used them. And you could see his sense of power and control growing.
But in Northern California, at least, the family was monitored by outsiders.
I saw him on a weekly basis. He would bring the girls into the office. It was a big occasion. I would go out to a home and see them. There was always that string. There was always some reality.
The family left San Francisco in the summer of 1967 and began an odyssey up and down the California coast. Moving from place to place was one way Manson kept his followers entertained enough to stay. They started spending more time in the Los Angeles area. There, Manson hoped to make a name for himself in rock and roll.
I think he felt that once he got down there, things were going to be very, very different. He had contacts with the Beach Boys.
It was through the women that Manson made his connection with Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys. In Los Angeles, Wilson picked up 2 of the family women hitchhiking and took them home. Soon, Manson and the rest of the family showed up and moved in with Wilson for several months. Then, through Wilson, Manson did some recording, but nothing came of the sessions. Manson was always bitter that his music would remain unheard.
They came to the ranch, lady. I didn't go to them, they came to me. You're stealing my music every day. You're writing my songs, you're playing my game.
In August of 1968, longtime family member Susan Atkins found the family a new home, an old Western movie set and now riding stable owned by an 80-year-old half-blind man named George Spahn. Leslie Van Houten joined the family in the summer of 1968.
You know, all very fun in the beginning, innocent.
At first, the family reveled in the crumbling movie set and the beautiful countryside around it. They play-acted roles they might have taken in old movies. It was like summer camp, and Charles Manson was head counselor.
It was a great place, actually. We could make anything we wanted out of it. It was like having the Our Gang set, you know. You could turn it into anything.
The whole idea was to let time disappear. There was no time. We were all living now. Now was the only time.
See, at first, the magical mystery tour was that we would be cowboys or gypsies or pirates, and every day it was to wear a different role so that we would get more out of ourselves, and every day was Halloween.
Losing oneself, killing old egos, and replacing them with Manson and his very particular view of the world. It was the serious goal of all that play acting that Manson directed.
If you wipe away somebody's identity, say society is corrupt, forget about everything you ever learned, but then you substitute your own philosophy. It's like wiping the blackboard clean and then introducing your philosophy, and then you become the absolute leader.
Bit by bit, the family became one with Manson.
One of his things was to stop you during the day, and he'd put your palms up to his, and then he'd move them in any direction that he could. Or he'd make a series of faces, and then you were supposed to try to keep up with them. And the whole thing was always geared toward just complete mirroring of him.
One powerful way that Manson maintained control was through drugs, in particular LSD.
Well, we took hundreds of trips together.
The acid trips were exercises in total control.
With Charlie, he actually did almost like drug programming. I mean, he was the focal point at all times. And what seemed so amazing is that he somehow, because acid is a very powerful drug,